It's commencement season, and people from all over the country are going to university campuses celebrating the achievement of their loved ones, graduation from college. Well, for historically black colleges and universities, it means a little bit more. Here, we just celebrated commencement at Norfolk State University, where we had our House Speaker, Don Scott, give the address to our graduates. But across the country, students from historically black colleges and universities and African American families are celebrating this great achievement. So what is the value of HBCUs? What is the impact today? And how does this continue the legacy moving on? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our HBCU Commencement Special, The Value of Our Colleges. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. And once again, you're joining us for our commencement special, The Value of HBCUs, today and in the future. As always, we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. And again, it's a great Sunday. And of course, for those of you that celebrate, happy Cinco de Mayo as well. So it is a phenomenal Sunday here in Hampton Roads, and we pray that's the same for you where you are. You know, today is a special day because it's the day of post-graduation commencement exercises for a lot of people. And as I mentioned earlier, we just celebrated and had our commencement exercises here at Norfolk State University, where we had the historic commencement speaker delegate, the Honorable Don Scott, Speaker of the House of Delegates here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, who is the first African-American speaker of the House of Delegates here in the history of the Commonwealth. So he gave his first commencement speech here as the first African-American speaker of the House at historically black college and university to African-American graduates and other graduates of this great institution. You know, just a lot of symbolism around that, but also realism. And it's a great opportunity to talk about the perspective and the value of our institutions that I'm a proud graduate of, and I've been fortunate enough to work at and continue to have see great things happen from our students here today. And I have with us, joining us, none other than my good friend, my guy, you know, who is also a proud HBCU graduate, currently serves on the board of his university that he graduated from, and none other than Dr. Will LaVeist, award-winning journalist, author, and also board member of Lincoln University. Will, how you feel this morning?
Hey, I'm feeling excellent, man, and I appreciate you having me on. The irony is that as your listeners are listening to this now, I'll actually be at commencement at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, and we'll be proud to be listening to our keynote, who's Brian Stevenson,
yes,
who is the renowned attorney and executive director, Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery, Alabama, and also receiving an honorary degree will be Dr. Janetta Cole, former president of Spelman. And then we also have our fellow alum, Sherelle Parker,
wow,
who is the 101st female mayor of the city of Philadelphia. So imagine that, you know, a sister coming out of Lincoln University,
yeah,
born and raised in Philadelphia, and becomes the 100th mayor of Philadelphia. And then the other honorary degree recipient, none other than the iconic Stevie Wonder, will be there. So,
wow.
I mean, we got a full lineup, and it's well deserved for our, you know, fantastic students and for, you know, a university that was a groundbreaking university from the very beginning. You know, Lincoln was founded in 1854. It was actually the first of the HBCUs that was actually established at the very beginning as a college. Mm-hmm. You know, you probably know that a lot of HBCUs, a lot of listeners probably know that many of the HBCUs were founded after the Civil War,
right,
and they actually were like offering primary and secondary education and college prep, and then they evolved, many of them evolved later and became full-fledged colleges. Well, Lincoln has that distinction of actually being founded before the Civil War. So you have our people were still enslaved, and this college was established in 1854 saying that, black folks could absolutely achieve in mass and higher education. And then, ironically, 100 years later, it's a Lincoln grad, Thurgood Marshall, who wins the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. So it's just, our HBCUs are American history. And I know that's one of the reasons why you even do this show, that these are great stories. All of these schools have great stories.
Absolutely. And when we talk about great stories, we got many of those stories that we can reference, of many African Americans that went to HBCUs, graduated from our institutions, and not just achieve greatness in their own for them own selves, which is what college is all about in the first place, helping yourself,
right,
helping your family. But they also did it to help everybody else. And when people talk about the value of HBCUs, I just snicker, because if you only knew the history, if you only knew what it does for students now, it's you wouldn't even say that. You'd say, how can we add more value to it? Will, both, I graduated from HBCU, Southern University, both undergrad, my bachelor's, and also law school. But also, my two sons, my wife and I, two sons, are attending and will graduate, absolutely will, from HBCUs.
You're going to see to that. You're going to see to that.
Absolutely. It's funny because I remember, I went to integrated schools, back home. And for me, I've always been in integrated schools for the most part, because we were the first generation of full-blown integration. But for me, when I was choosing my college, it was all about an HBCU, period.
Right.
And it's because of, for me, at that time and still now, it's about being around my people and seeing my people progress in a world that forces you or says you can't progress. And it was also growing up in church. You and I both grew up in Church of God in Christ, being in our black communities where our fathers and families own businesses, and our professionals were black. So you saw that black excellence, that microcosm of black excellence in a macro world where black excellence was not really pushed, not pushed at all, and a lot of times knocked down. Fast forward 25 years later, I have children, and now I remember my son, my oldest son, we went on our college tour, and the first one we went to was Howard. And we walked the campus, and I was like, son, what do you think? And, he was standing there. I never forget. We're standing in the middle of the quad. He's looking at the library. And it also brings chills to me when I think about this. So I walk up to him. I said, son, what do you think? Because we're going to other colleges. He said, Dad, we don't have to go anywhere else. This is it. I said, wow. I said, son, you sure? He said, Dad, this is it. And it brought chills, but also tears, because nothing else had to be said other than, I feel you. Everything my black son said, I felt the same way, 25 years ago. And I said, son, I feel you. Our youngest son, he chose Virginia State University. And we went on campus, and I said, we were talking, and I'm talking and so forth. And I said, son, well, what do you like about campus? He said, Dad, it's nothing I don't like about this campus. And I said, because he's got offers to play basketball. He's an athlete at other schools, other majority institutions, great institutions. Right. But he said, Dad, this is it. I don't want to go. He said, I don't want to go anywhere else. Virginia State's for me. And again, it's not saying that the other institutions are not great or good.
Right.
But it's something about our institution that drew me and that drew our sons. What about you? What about your story?
Well, I mean, ironically, and I'm the youngest of 6 in all, and I had older brothers and sisters that
you the baby.
Went to, I'm the baby, But sometimes, being a baby has advantages, and then, it can have some disadvantages. But in my case, I had older brothers and sisters that went to college, and one that actually went to an HBCU, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. And then the other two, one went to a city school and one went to a rural or suburban, predominantly white school. And so the HBCU heritage, because my parents didn't they didn't have college degrees, but they knew education was important. And, growing up in New York, right, you didn't, as opposed to in the South, where the HBCU culture is I think, much more prevalent. In New York, as I said, the closest HBCU to us is Lincoln and also Cheney, which is both in Pennsylvania, right? So it's like, for me, it wasn't as prevalent. And then being in the black community in New York and in North, the HBCU experience wasn't as prevalent. But I was exposed to it because there used to be this game, the Grambling-Morgan game, football game, at Yankee Stadium that 100 black men used to put together. And we would see that game and see the bands and so forth. So I had an understanding of it. I had a curiosity for it. And you mentioned your son's playing ball, and I was also recruited to play basketball, but ironically, by a predominantly white school, small Catholic school in Massachusetts. And I just wanted to leave New York, and most of my other offers were for junior colleges. And for somehow, from my parents, I had this stereotype that, junior college is just an extension of
high school.
High school, right. And again, misnomer. I mean, God rest both of my parents' souls, But again, they didn't have that college experience to understand it, and especially for sports. Junior college could absolutely be the right route for you to go, especially if you want to go on after 2 years and go to a Division I school. But when I got on that campus, small Catholic, predominantly white campus, I think there was maybe 12 black students, 10 of us were on the basketball team. Unlike your sons, this is it. It was like, this ain't it, And I was like, what did I do? And because I went and saw the school sight unseen, I went because, again, they recruited me and showed that strong interest. And I had to say, man, I got to stick it out because my parents told me once you start something, you finish it out.
That's right.
And then at least you can finish out the year and then decide what you want to do. So I finished it out, and it was after that I took a second look and remembered my experience of seeing the Grambling State, Morgan game and the HBCU culture, and talking to my brother who went to UMES about it and others about it. And that's when I identified, wow, Lincoln was only 2 hours away, And when I got to Lincoln's campus, I had the experience that your son had. This is it. This is where I belong. And I think that this is where I belong experience comes from the fact that here you are as a black American, Afro-American, African-American, however you want to call us, and you don't have to explain yourself anymore. You are amongst, like you said, among your culture. And you don't feel this added pressure of having to explain who you are or be the advocate or be the encyclopedia for people who are not culturally aware. You don't really have a concern for our community. And then you start learning about the diversity that exists within our community.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the most profound experiences that I had at Lincoln, even coming out of New York, where you have a plethora of different cultures, black cultures, Caribbean, Southern, African. When I got to Lincoln and saw, the flow coming from the West Coast and the South, and how the sisters in Baltimore never left their rooms without their hair being done to the nines, and go-go music from D.C., all these kinds of different things you get exposed to about us as a people, and not to mention, the rich history, literature, culture that I started to dive into, learning about Langston Hughes and all these other great writers that were actually there at Lincoln, Gil Scott-Heron, who was there, 10 years, so you start really learning about yourself and really understanding who we are as a people and our value to the American story.
It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVeist, and you've joined us for our Commencement special, HBCUs, their value today and tomorrow, and the legacy in which they leave. Today, I'm talking with my good friend, award-winning journalist and author, Dr. Will LaVeist, and we're talking about our experiences at HBCUs, but also looking at the value that they have throughout the world for our community and also the people in which they serve. We just completed our commencement exercises here at Norfolk State University, where we had the opportunity to have the very first African-American Speaker of the House, Dunn Scott, give remarks to the students that walked across the stage and receive their life-changing degrees that they will utilize for their purpose in this world. Will, when we talk about life-changing, right? That piece of paper, it's a piece of paper, but that piece of paper represents a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of investment, a lot of money in order to help our community and help individuals do better for themselves. I want to reference a study from the Brookings Institute. This is entitled Understanding College Choice, HBCU Context. And this study was actually published this past February, 2024. And one of the part that it points out, it says HBCU enrollment leads to gains in degree completion and household income. He said, but these outcomes are alongside larger student loan balances at age 30. So I want to take a look at first the upside and then the downside when we talk about investment in our institutions. So check out this statistic. From this Brookings study, it says that HBCUs, which comprise only 3%, by the way, a post-education institution, all right? So I want people to understand, when you talk about HBCUs, you're only talking about 3% out of 100 higher education institutions. And it says that they're on the minds of Black Americans who graduate high school. They said among 1.2 million Black SAT takers who graduate high school between 2004 and 2010, they said almost 40% applied to at least one HBCU and 16% attended an HBCU. Now, let's move forward and look at those that attended HBCUs. Aside from serving HBCUs, a disproportionate number of Black Americans, it also shows that HBCU applicants initially enrolling at institutions, it serves them well. How so? Enrolling in an HBCU, according to this study by Brookings Institute, increases the probability of earning a college degree by 12%. That's 30% higher than similar peers. Also, a bachelor's degree by 14.6%, which is 40% higher, and doubles the probability of completing a STEM degree. HBCUs also enrollment increases the estimated household income at around age 30 by 5%. Now, when you take a look at these positive effects from HBCU enrollment, the strongest for students whose alternative enrollment options are more likely to be either two-year colleges or no college at all. However, HBCU enrollment leads to higher student debt, which is in part due to longer enrollment spells in college. So, Will, I want to take a look at this first, and we'll take a look at the second on how we can support and whether the ramifications of being in college longer. So we just looked at this study, 2004, 2010. Just by applying and enrolling HBCU, you increase your chance of graduating by 12%, 30% higher than your peer that went to a non-HBCU. I mean, just that number alone justifies HBCUs.
Yeah, because a big part of succeeding is how you feel in that environment, how you feel about yourself, how the individuals in that environment are supporting your learning experience, And so when you find yourself in an environment that is saying, yes, you can, and yes, we expect you to be great, you begin to tap into your inner strength and your inner abilities and what you can do. I mean, the books that we're all learning from are all the same. The accreditation bodies, right, for all these schools are the same. So anybody that wants to think, well, the reason why they're graduating more and so forth is because these schools have lower standards. Oh, no, absolutely not. They're accredited by the same bodies, and oftentimes many of the HBCUs are also state schools now.
That's right.
Or in the case of Lincoln, state related. Mm-hmm. So they have to uphold and operate on the same standards plane as any of the other state schools. So when you create an environment that expects success and then provides the kind of resources, whether that be actual books and actual computers down to really the people resources of having a professor, mentors that care about you, being able to see people in leadership who look like you, it tells you, it communicates to you that, oh, yes, you can, and yes, we expect you to do well. And in fact, when I left Lincoln, I felt empowered that I could go on to any school and succeed. I must admit, when I came out of high school, I believe I was college ready. I thought I could have gone on to many of the better schools and done well. I didn't always apply myself in high school. And, I relied on my athleticism and, my ability to pull out on a test at the end to get me through. But I still felt college ready, right?
Right.
And coming to Lincoln, after I graduated from there, I felt even that much more ready. And so when I went on to the University of Arizona, I graduated with a higher GPA at the University of Arizona
wow.
School of Journalism than I did at Lincoln. And then when I went on to ODU down the block for you to get my PhD, they're not handing, excuse me, folks, they're not giving out PhDs. They're not just handing those things out.
At any university.
At any university. You know what I mean? So for me to come out of New York City public schools, Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York, one of the toughest, the lowest performing neighborhoods on the planet, when you talk about an industrialized country, and then to go to Lincoln and be nurtured by professors and leaders who said, no, we expect high standards of you, and you can achieve, and you are going to achieve. I just was able to springboard from what my parents had already instilled in me and tap into it myself, because ultimately, it's up to the student to do what's required in that classroom. And we're going to pray your sons to graduate college, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that got to write those papers and pass those tests.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, not just pray, but they just finished up finals last week. So, listen, prayers going out because they got to keep the scholarships too.
That's right. That's right.
And which I want to segue when I talk about scholarships very quickly. Double the probability of getting a STEM degree. There's another statistic that shows that judges and lawyers, right. HBCUs produce over 80% of judges, right? And also over 50% of lawyers. I mean, come on, man. Come on. I mean, think about that. I mean, when you see somebody on the bench, somebody in the courtroom, you're seeing the product of an HBCU graduate. Doctors, it doubles the probability that you finish your STEM degree. I mean, STEM is one of the major areas for growth, in this new economy, this new world moving forward. So again, the value is there, when you talk about our institutions and what we bring to the table. But there is, of course, the downside. And the downside is the debt. Now, I mentioned scholarships, thank God that there's a lot of scholarships out there. Ourselves were fortunate enough to take advantage of scholarships for them. But it didn't come just out of the air. It's not like they woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to apply to these. But it took guidance from parents, my wife and I, and our experience of knowing what it's like to go through school and helping our students get scholarships. But one of the things that one of the issues that a lot of our community has, they don't have the advantage of two parents or one parent going through the process or even being involved in education. So when it ends up happening, you got to take out these things called student loans, right? And the financial issues of you not just going to school, but you got to support, back home. You may have a child. You may have, you have to support the house. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so there are a lot of things. So therefore, HBC enrollment, what ends up happening is that you end up going into staying in school longer. because of these issues. According to the study, it also showed that because of the lack of financial well-being, they find that HBCU enrollment leads to a lower probability of impacts. Well, at least an impact on credit scores, or also this may be the lower probability of having a mortgage because you're saddled with this debt. Will, what is it when we talk about investment in HBCUs? How important is it to invest in the endowments and the ability for our students to have scholarships?
Oh man, it's critical. I mean, I can tell you, at Lincoln, that most of the challenges that our president, Dr. Brenda Allen, who's also an alum of Lincoln, most of the challenges that she has is with students who are having to drop out because of lack of funds, not because of lack of achievement, but because of lack of funds. And, some years ago, one of my brothers and I, Dr. Thomas LaVeist, who's a dean of the School of Public Health down at Tulane, he's the other HBCU grad. He and I rewrote a book, Tom Joyner Presents How to Prepare for College. People, your listeners probably know Tom Joyner, philanthropist, iconic radio personality, and longtime supporter of HBCUs. We partnered with him, and he commissioned us to write the book for him. And in that book, we talk about the kinds of things you can do to be able to prepare to pay for college, prepare to succeed in college. And one of the big things, that is a challenge is the endowments. The endowments that universities have is what often enables them to be able to give scholarships to deserving students, or give scholarships to students who academically or financially have a need. And when you don't have that, it puts a strain. And then, the alumni giving, oftentimes, again, culturally, Black people actually in America actually give at a higher percentage of their income than other groups. We give a lot of our money to churches, right?
It's a nonprofit.
Absolutely. You should, right? But when it comes to universities, a lot of times our alumni giving is not as high as it ought to be. We got, for some reason, we have alums who graduate, and I see this time and time again. They graduate, they love coming back, and I love my university, and so forth and so on. They love connecting with their friends and former classmates, all of that. But then when it comes to stroking that check, there's this internal, grievance that we have. Like, for some reason, I can spend money going to homecoming on a new outfit, on gas for my car, on, lodging. But when it comes to writing the check for the university, somehow I feel like, I don't have to do that. And in part, the reason why alums also have difficulty doing that is because of what you just mentioned, college debt. So if it's tightening your discretionary income, it makes it hard for you to give back. And so that's where the endowments become important. And that's where any high school student that's listening, the number one thing that you can do to put yourself in a better position to be able to get money and not have to take out a bunch of student loans is to get excellent grades, is to be college ready, is to put yourself in a position where you can qualify for a lot of the merit, and academic scholarships that are out there, and also put you in a position to get in and out of school as fast as possible, so that you can get into the economy and then get a great career, or start a great business and start creating wealth and then giving back to your institution.
Absolutely.
So we talked about that in the book. And I was always been blessed that people tell me, I read that book and it helped me. And we talk about other strategies, even like how you can use your home, the equity in your home, if you have one, to be able to help finance a college education, those kinds of things.
Awesome. Well, give us that book one more time, Will.
Tom Joyner Presents How to Prepare for College. You can get it on Amazon.
Awesome.
And, maybe tell Tom Joyner, hey, you want to update the book? Because a few things have changed, in the last 10 or so years, but the information in the book is still very relevant.
That's awesome. Once again, you've been listening to Save the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. Thank you so much, my friend, Dr. Will LaVeist, for joining us for our HBCU special, The Value of Our Institutions During Commencement Season, now, in the future, and how we continue our legacy. Continue to join us every Sunday, as you always do, here on WSB Hot 91, as we broadcast from none other than the biggest and the greatest HBCU in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Norfolk State University. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric LaVille.